Hello, this is Jill Shook, and I'm the chair of the Greater Pasadena Affordable Housing Group, and I'm thrilled to be with you to share it's an orientation about our organization and ways that you can be involved. And so I have with me Morgan Tucker, and she will be also interacting with me somewhat in this orientation. It's the first of three parts of our orientation. So to get started, I'm going to share with you a PowerPoint, which is right here. And let me make sure it's on full screen.
Exactly.
There we go. Great. So the focus of this first orientation is looking at the problem, the focus, and how we get our work done. So if you start, we'll be looking both at the crisis in US, California, and Pasadena, then look at the needs in Pasadena specifically, who needs affordable housing, and why we should be focusing on affordable housing, and then GPAHG, the Greater Pasadena Affordable Housing Group, our vision, mission, history of successes in our platform. And then sort of the anatomy of GPAHG, who we are, what makes up our group, and how it relates to the larger organization we're connected to, which is called MHCH, or Making Housing a Community Happen. So hold on your seats, let's get started.
All right.
So the problem initially I want to look at, it's very severe right now in our nation, especially in California. So there's actually no state that has an adequate supply of affordable housing at the lower income areas. In US, we need 7.3 million additional units for the very low and extremely low income categories. California is the housing capital in the US, and LA alone has 53,000 people experiencing homelessness. So if you were to calculate how much money you need to earn to live indoors, it's crazy. It's about $32 per hour. Right. And so few of us make that much. So there's a reason why we see such an influx of homelessness, especially in our state. I'm going to look specifically here at Pasadena. It's kind of interesting. There's something called severely cost burdened. It's shocking to learn that 42% of the renters and 34% of the homeowners are in that severely cost burdened category. That means they're spending more than 50% of their income on housing. Can you imagine when there's so little expendable income, it really makes it difficult for a city to thrive with enough people. Yeah, with enough people having expendable income to shop and to keep the city thriving. According to the 2018 count, we don't yet have the final results for 2019, but last year there were 677 people counted in Pasadena who are experiencing homelessness. That's just really unacceptable, and there's a lot we can do about this and have done about this. But that's still 18% more than 2017 and 28% more than 2016. The reason for this is that the City Council has not been approving a lot of permanent supportive housing. When we were approving that, we actually lowered our homeless count by 54% in the city of Pasadena between 2011 to 2016. There's an decrease in chronic homelessness, which is really good news. So a 27% decrease, that means that our permanent supportive housing projects are working. And the increase right now of those that are homeless are typically our seniors on fixed incomes. When you look at our increase in rents, average between $2,400 and $3,000, there's no way we are on a fixed Social Security income. So any questions on this slide, Morgan, before I move to the next one?
No, none so far. I know you're going to speak more in detail about permanent supportive housing a bit later on, so I think I'll pick that up later.
Yeah, I'll be describing that, yeah. So our next slide, we look at some of the reasons why people become homeless in Pasadena. Primarily, it's economic reasons. I mentioned about the increase in rents. About 75% of those experiencing homeless are due to economic reasons. And this typically means short-term homelessness. It's not usually the chronic. And those are the ones we actually see on the streets, the chronic homeless. It's only 25% of the overall homeless population. And it's long-term in the sense that they've been homeless at least for a year or repeatedly over a period of years. And so this is actually a very expensive population to try to get housed, but our city is open to this, and that's really good news. And we'll be talking about that more. Senior housing, we really need to look at seniors, as I mentioned, with that huge increase of homeless seniors in our city, 65%. Additionally, renters, they need affordable housing. Again, I mentioned that it's about 50% of an increase in the cost of rental housing in the last decade. But as you look at your income, I don't know anyone that's had a 50% increase in their income.
Right.
So there's really a big gap there. So first-time homebuyers, they also need affordable housing. First-time homebuyers cannot get into the market if they are not wealthy. And so when an average price of homes in Pasadena at $626,000, that's a 4% increase over last year. Plus there's tighter underwriting rules, and oftentimes our younger homeowners or would-be homeowners have a lot of student debt, which again makes it really hard to get into a home. So they need some help. And then homeowners need help. And oftentimes we don't think about homeowners needing help, but there are people that have been in their homes for years. And so all they're paying is taxes. And sometimes those taxes are hard to cover, especially if they have a lot of code violations that they have to fix and maintain their home. And so they also are at risk at times of foreclosure. So here's a little quiz. Let's see how you do, Morgan. So true or false? Do you need to learn 15 an hour to afford an apartment in Pasadena?
That's false because it's false because it's more than that. Yeah,
it's much more than that. Then 32% of renters in Pasadena are cost burdened, pay more than 50%. Is that true or false?
I think that would be true.
That's right. Absolutely. And then additional 34% of homeowners are paying more than 50%. So that's a really high number. So GPAHG, we were founded to address the high cost of coffee in Pasadena. True
Not quite. Not quite.
And then the homeless count in Pasadena has increased by 8% since 2017.
Oh, was that, I thought it was 10% or more.
Actually, it's 18. It's 18%.
It's 18, yeah, okay. I thought it was definitely higher than that. Yeah. So that's false.
Then here's a multiple choice for you. Those in need of affordable housing are A, employers need affordable housing for their employees because it's hard to pay enough to cover the rising housing cost. The chronic homeless, they need affordable housing. And then city staff and teachers. So what do you think?
Everyone.
You got it. Every one of them. We have, I think it's close to half of our city staff in their city that can't even live in the city.
Wow, that's wow.
Yeah. Over 54% of our teachers don't live here, and some of them drive, a high percentage of drive over an hour to get to our town.
An hour.
So an hour, yeah. It's not the way I don't think God intended us to live. But so why focus on affordable housing? There's a lot of good reasons. There's actually not one law in the country that requires affordable housing. It always happens as a result of advocacy. So if we aren't there to support affordable housing in our communities, it typically just won't get built. We can see that in adjacent cities, in San Marino, in La Cañada. There's just no advocates present that are trying to make sure it happens. With inclusionary, which we'll be briefly talking about, where a percentage of all new housing is set aside as required us to be affordable. That does require that affordable housing be built, but again, that whole policy, inclusionary, was advocated for. That doesn't happen automatically in any city at all. So another reason is because affordable housing, it creates a healthy and sustainable city. We hear one of the major complaints all over Southern California is traffic. And so when people have to drive such a long distance to be able to afford someplace to live, that's not sustainable. That's not good for the environment, and that's not good for our health. And so it's just creates a really good, healthy community when you have a good mix of incomes. The California state law requires every city plan for sufficient housing for all income levels. And so that's called the housing element. The key word is plan. They're to plan for it, but they aren't necessarily required to implement the plan. So our group is involved in helping to implement this plan so that there's housing for all people, all income levels, students, those experiencing homelessness, families, single seniors, and other special needs. And then because our group is faith rooted, we also look at the biblical understanding, which in the second presentation will be going in more depth on that, but it's really interesting that 1,250 times the Bible mentions cities. And cities are mentioned also in the context of caring for the most vulnerable. And there's consequences if they don't do that. Sometimes we don't realize that where someone lives is really a core part of biblical teaching. Most of the Bible, the people in the Bible are identified by their geography. The people of Israel, Paul of Tarsus, Jesus of Nazareth, the prophets all spoke to leaders and to cities and nations. They spoke directly to these communities and their leaders, challenging them to care for the poor and widow. So, so Jesus challenged cities to show compassion and to be an example. And he really wanted to gather all of Israel as a mother hen and really begin to help them understand what it means to be a compassionate city. And that's really what we're about. Jesus loved cities and he held them responsible. You can see where it says, woe to you, Chorazin, woe to you, Bethsaida. He was challenging a whole city to look at how they care for the most needy. And he even compared them to Sodom and Gomorrah. It was very tragic that there was judgment on cities, but the actual reason that Sodom and Gomorrah were destroyed is because they didn't care for the most vulnerable. You can see that in scripture in Ezekiel. So the Bible actually, it teaches us to care for the poor. If one of your countrymen becomes poor and is unable to support himself among you, help him as you would an alien or a temporary resident so he can continue to live among you. Do not take interest of any kind from him, but fear your God so that your countrymen may continue to live among you. We have a huge displacement problem in Pasadena. We've lost over 24% of our African Americans. So, but we pride as having a diverse community. That's part of our city's vision. So we need to figure out how to make it possible so that we are not displacing, and so everyone has a place in our city. So why do we do all this? It really boils down to love, whether you're a person of Christian faith or any other faith or no faith at all of us understand that we need to love. And so you can see there when we're at the city council, love your neighbor, no exceptions. And so our neighbors even mean our homeless brothers and sisters. I'm going to give you another quick quiz, Morgan. Are you ready?
I'm so ready.
Okay. So a healthy city has enough housing for all income levels. A, it has gated housing to protect its wealthier residents from its lower income population. B, or it is part of, a healthy city is part of God's intention. Which one do you think is true?
I would say A is true and also C is true as well.
Right. Okay, good job. And so the second question, which of the following is a reason to focus on affordable housing? Because there's no greater commandment than to love, because affordable housing creates healthy, sustainable cities. The Bible teaches us to care for the poor because it minimizes traffic when housing when you can house folks that are close to jobs. And so,
Right.
yeah. So I guess
Yeah.
that was pretty obvious, isn't it?
Yeah, all of them are compelling reasons
Yeah,
to
all
focus
the
on
above,
affordable
all the
housing,
above.
all the above.
And we all have a different motivation. This is just a smattering. I'm sure if all of us listening to this video were able to talk about why they're motivated. We could probably make pages of reasons why we're concerned about this issue. So just to give you a little bit of an overview of our organization, we have a vision, and it's essentially that all Pasadena residents have a safe, quality, accessible, and affordable housing. People are not displaced from the community, and our community is racially, ethnically, and socially diverse. That's our vision. We do this primarily through preserving affordable housing and policy and education. You can see there our mission. Whoops. Our mission is to educate, advocate, and act to provide safe, clean, affordable housing for very low, very low, and no income residents. We primarily focus on the lower income in our organization. We've been doing this for 20 years. We've been advocating for housing justice. And so we've had a lot of successes. We started off originally as Affordable Housing Action. This was started in the 90s, a grassroots effort in response to the savings and loan crisis. And then it was initially sponsored by the American Friends Service Committee, which is a program of the Quakers. Later it became PAHG, Pasadena Affordable Housing Group, and today we've expanded it to GPAHG, to the Greater Pasadena. So we're actually doing some work in some of the adjacent cities, in Alhambra, as well as in some in Temple City, but also in Monrovia. So we're very excited to see our expansion. So we've had a lot of successes. I'm going to briefly run through these. We first tried to do rent control. We failed miserably. And so we're very grateful that the Pasadena Tenants Union continues to surround that effort with promising results. We came close a year ago, and so we're hoping next year that they will see bringing rent control.
Get it done.
Yeah, we need it desperately. So in 2001, GPAHG played a really an important role in crafting and getting the inclusionary housing policy passed, which is basically is any developer that comes into our city, if they have 10 units or more, they have to set aside 15% of those as affordable, or they can pay a fee or build off site. So as of March 2019, we had produced over 577 units. What's so amazing, there's no cost to the city to do this. Actually, it puts money in the city's Affordable Housing Trust Fund, which has amounted to about 21 million. So that 21 million has been leveraged, and it now has produced over 690 more additional units. So this one policy has been really powerful. It's up for review, and our inclusionary housing group is now looking about how to strengthen this, and maybe even doubling that 15 up to 30 in certain very tall buildings. Let's go back. Let's see here. So in 2005 through 2006, we were able to help work with Habitat for Humanity. There was a Army Reserve site called Desiderio underneath the Colorado Street Bridge, and we were able to lead a campaign to get 9 Habitat homes approved. In 2007, we were able to expose the Pasadena Manor. It was a retirement community with 157 residents who were wrongfully evicted. And so we were able to work with a lawyer to get them relocation costs. Then you can see how we even had a gang member who came and helped us at the city council. We were getting those Habitat units. He was holding one of these signs. He'd been tagging around the community, and I said, you know, this would be a much better way to do some tagging. So
it looks great.
Yeah, thanks. So we have a few more successes. I think it's important that you understand our history. So bear with me. We successfully succeeded in advocating for a housing department. We did not have one in the city of Pasadena. So we were able to see that happen, and that significantly increased the production of affordable housing in our city. In 2010, as a result of our input, we were able to encourage a developer to set aside not just the 15% required, but actually go up to 20% in their 800 units they proposed, resulting in 79 units that are really completely indistinguishable from the luxury units. This is near Old Town, Old Pasadena, close to Jobs, close to Metro Line. So this is really one of the best, some of the finest affordable housing development you can imagine. Close to Jobs, close to public transport, so you can minimize the number of cars. They even have in there shared electric vehicles so that you don't have to have as many cars on the road. In 2012, we helped write a 21 detailed analysis of our Pasadena's housing element. Believe it or not, we went around to every site that was proposed as potential sites for affordable housing. We vetted each property to make sure that that was a legitimate property. We even went to the state and we said, you know, we don't think this is adequate. We don't think you should approve it. So they sent it back to the city. We felt we needed some dates and deadlines and some of the different goals of the city so that we could hold the city accountable. Just how Jesus held city accountable. We're creating a system to allow us to then go to the city council and say, well, by 2015, you're supposed to do a study on second unit. So how can we help you accomplish that goal? So now I'm going to mention a little bit about some of our homeless efforts, but first I'm going to talk about Fuller Seminary, since there's 179 student housing units that ended up going market rate, and then today we're working with Fuller to help save 169 inclusionary units to make sure they stay permanently affordable. In 2016, we're able to stop an anti-camping ordinance, basically an ordinance that would make it illegal to be homeless. You could be put in jail if you're on the street sleeping, which we felt would be very wrong. It's actually unconstitutional. When we went to the city council, we succeeded in stopping that from happening. In 2017, we were able to win a stronger tenant protection ordinance. Up until then, there was a loophole that allowed landlords not to pay relocation costs if they would put their tenants on a month-to-month rental. So we fixed that. And then ADUs. This is when we were at the city council. Actually, this was at a planning commission. It was a very exciting evening. We even had our little second unit, you can see right there, our float. So we succeeded in lowering the property size requirement for having an ADU, an accessory dwelling unit, from 15,000 square feet down to 7,200 square feet. So that makes it possible, and anyone can convert their garage. So it's much more doable now for people. We also were able to get rid of the 20,000 impact fee and lower it to 957, which again makes it much more doable for people to build these. The impact fee is lowered only in the case if you're going to make your second unit affordable, or to Section 8 or to a family member. So there was only one that was built from 2003 to 2017, and just in the last year there's already been 40 people that have built them, 13 of them for affordable. So we're thrilled with the results of our efforts. Today our focus is really looking at approval of specific sites. We were able to approve at Heritage Square, which is on Fair Oaks and Orange Grove, 69 units for homeless seniors. As I mentioned, it's the fastest growing population. We're thrilled that we were able to get the city to approve this. We had over 1,000 letters that were signed by community members and church members. We slept on the site one night with religious leaders. We had 2 prayer vigils. And because we were so effective in getting this passed, the mayor proposed that they take the YWCA and make that into housing for homeless. So now that's what we're working on. So here's our platform. It's very extensive. Obviously, you can't read this, but you can find it on the website if you'd like to study more details. This keeps us on our toes. There are so many things in this platform that we could attain to, And some of these things you may find absolutely fascinating, something you'd like to dig your heels into. The anatomy of GPAHG, basically, this is how we're organized. We have core group members, you can see at the top. As I go around clockwise, we have affiliate members, active members, a lot of partners, congregational liaison members, subcommittees. We have 4 different subcommittees, and we call this the beloved community. That's the same word that Martin Luther King used in his organizing efforts, as we come together to focus on how we can create this change in our communities. If we go to the next slide, who are these people that create this beloved community? We've had all kinds of folks in our community, that in our groups. On average, we've had maybe 20 members over the years. They've consisted of retired planning commissioners, city planners, lawyers, architects, nonprofit directors, pastors, caseworkers, former homeless individuals, and long-term advocates. And it's really delightful. Even some folks that are homeless that are now in our group that have a powerful role to play. So we seek to build this beloved community each time we meet. In our monthly meeting, that's the 4th Tuesday of every month. And also as we celebrate our wins. It sounds like we've got some kind of airplane overhead. Is that true?
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
Little.
So, yeah, sorry for that noise. But we also, in our subcommittees, we try to build that beloved community, a sense of connection and getting to know each other around promoting and learning and researching. Also in our one-on-one meetings. So this is very important. The foundation of any good advocacy is getting to know our decision makers personally. So when we sit down with them and get to know them, we consider them part of our beloved community. So within congregations through our liaison membership, so I mentioned liaison, that's basically when your organization joins to become part of our group. Then your whole congregation or your organization is able to tap into the people. And when we need to have crowds show up at the city council, you might have 10, 12, 15, 20 people from your group that would show up. And they won't need to say a word. Just by showing up, they can create huge change, because the city council's members always count how many people are standing for this issue. In our actions, we've had affordable housing tours, forums, public meetings within the broader community with our message. And afterwards, we try to reflect this message and consider how it was received. And if we need to make adjustments, we always do a lot of reflection after each of our meetings to see if we're on target, and really building that beloved community. So everyone has a role to play. Morgan, who's on this a webinar with us, she plays a very significant role. We're very grateful for her. As new attenders, you may find that one of these roles, it just hits your fancy and you'd love to help, or one that you'd like to learn more about. We need note takers, someone to help create our agendas, set appointments with city leaders, monitor planning commission meetings. In other words, know when they happen, look at their agenda and see if it is something we need to show up for. Same with the city council members, same with the ed tech. It's a subcommittee of the city council that addresses affordable housing. Planning location of meetings. Sometimes that can be a challenge. We need someone willing to help with that. So you can continue to see all different ways that, that you can be involved in, including sharing your own housing story at the city council. There's 4 subcommittees, if I mentioned, the ADUs, the Permanent Supportive Committee, Inclusionary Zoning and Safe Parking. So as we look at the ADU committee, we've done some great research over the years. We actually had an intern from Fuller who was also a realtor. He identified 740 ADUs in our city. We were able to do a comparative analysis on streets that had maybe 90 and the street next to it had none, showing that there was really no impact of these units. So I already mentioned the number we've been able to see increase in the last year as a result of our efforts. Then our inclusionary subcommittee, as I've already mentioned before, we've been meeting for the last year, looking to ways to improve the inclusionary policy we now have. And so, so we're excited so far in our efforts in meeting with the housing department, the planning department, the housing, the planning commission and the city council. We've gotten some great feedback on our proposal. You might be interested in joining these efforts. We're anticipating that this will come back to the city council soon. Then the homeless housing, which really is our permanent supportive housing committee. It's broader than just permanent supportive. Permanent supportive essentially is more geared toward the those that are chronically homeless. Let me take a sip of water here.
Yeah.
And so we have been able to successfully approve 69 units last fall, which was very exciting. Heritage Square South, that property sat vacant for 20 years. And so we knew it would be quite a fight, but we were able to get a unanimous vote for those 69. Wow. And then in addition to looking at new sites, the city has passed an ordinance to take derelict hotels in East Colorado and have those converted into housing for homeless. So we're supporting that effort in addition to the YWCA, which I mentioned before, which is a very exciting team. You might really enjoy jumping in on that team. So
Jill, I had a quick question. Quick question about permanent supportive housing. Could you elaborate a bit for me and anyone else who's interested a bit more about the supportive aspect of that? Like,
Sure.
What does that actually mean? What goes into it?
That's a really good question. So it's permanent because when you're in a shelter, you're soon going to need to find a place to live, you know, and so you're still homeless when you're in a shelter. When you're in a transitional housing, you're still homeless. But when you get into permanent housing, you are no longer homeless. This is what ends homelessness. And then the supportive part also helps you to stay housed. So what that means is that essentially you have access to case managers. You aren't required to access them, but they're there and available for you. And typically those people living in permanent supportive housing that access the supportive part, the encouragement, it means that they're going to help you look at your dreams, look at your goals. What is it you want for your life, and how can you get to where you want to be? Oftentimes people that are homeless have not had a chance to dream. They're at a survival mode. And you start actually living again and imagining a future for yourself. So support comes in all different forms, but that's just one way that the supportive part comes to play. But that's a good question. Thank you, Morgan. Safe parking. I don't know if you've heard of that or aware of what it is, but the growing need in San Gabriel Valley for those experiencing homeless is huge. And so many people, especially those seniors, are moving into their cars. So typically our organization focuses primarily on permanent housing, but in this case, we felt that we wanted to encourage some kind of safe parking available for those living in their cars. You can get ticketed. People stay up half the night watching to make sure they're safe. It's very hard to get a good night's rest in your car. So this safe parking provides maybe in a church parking lot, in some places where they can stay safely, and it puts every one of them through case management on a path to get permanently housed. So we're excited. We identified the Foothill Unity Center that is now agreed to host this, and they're now in the process of writing a $200,000 grant with the county to see if they can get this going. We have all kinds of partners in addition to the Foothill Unity Center. You can see some of the folks here: Union Station Homeless Services, Everyone In, LA Voice, Friends Indeed, Pasadena Tennis Union, and on and on. So we're thrilled that we have built these liaisons with different organizations and churches throughout the community. And what gives us a lot of wisdom and guidance for the work is our core group. So I just want to introduce you to a few of the folks that are part of this. They help kind of the engine and planning behind a lot of our work. Anne Marie, believe it or not, was once homeless when she was a teen. And she now works for Union Bank. She has 5 kids, and she wanted to build a back house, an ADU, but she had so much trouble with the city. She heard me speak. Actually, no, she read an article that I wrote, and she responded to that. Now, it could be that in your church, you might write an article for your church bulletin, and then someone would respond to that. I'm going to introduce you to Connie Millsap. She's actually a member of the First United Methodist Church. And so we pitched the idea of their church becoming a liaison member. And so they identified Connie that would be that liaison person from our group to the church. She is a pastor herself and has worked in the past in Dallas and other communities around their homeless populations. Cynthia Kirby, again, a member of our group who was homeless for years. For 10 years, she was considered chronically homeless. She was living in those derelict hotels in East Colorado. And those hotels full of drug use, prostitution. And so thankfully, God, with the love of Christ, has brought her out of that. She's a member of First Baptist, and she's a wife, a mother, and now is getting straight A's on all of her education. Wow. She's brilliant, and she does great research, especially on homeless housing. She's been a huge asset to our group, as well as her powerful story. Mercy, she became involved about 3 years ago. She heard me speak at Fuller Seminary, and she got engaged with this issue. She had an uncle who died when he was homeless. It just touched her heart. So God brought her to our organization. She also had a grandfather that was able to buy a house, even though it had a covenant on it that no people of color could purchase it. He was very light complexion, and they didn't actually realize he was African American. It's pretty amazing. But she has been a huge asset to our group. We really appreciate Mercy and her part. She's leading an effort at Fuller Seminary. Then my husband, he's part of our core group. He's a Quaker peace activist. He's had a heart and a passion for homeless people as long as he can remember. And so this is a perfect fit for him to really work in this whole area of
Jill, I'm not sure if you can hear me, but your microphone got turned off. So just click the unmute button next at the top. Okay. We'll edit that out.
Okay. So I'm going to introduce myself briefly. You can read these details later, but I just want to tell you 2 really brief stories that I think are important. I started an after-school program at Lake Avenue Church called STARS, and many of those students, after years of investing in their lives, their apartment buildings were being sold out from under them. And it was heartbreaking to see them leave our community. So I learned about Agape Court, which is a faith-based affordable housing complex, and they had openings. So I started moving families in there. And they were only spending 1/3 of their income when they moved into this apartment complex. So they had time for their kids. The kids started thriving. Every single one of the kids in this apartment complex ended up going to college and breaking that cycle of poverty. The second story is when I bought my home here in Pasadena, my intention to buy a home in an African American community was really to be a neighbor. but not realizing, because as I improved my property and as it went up in value, I began to see my African Americans, 3 of them went into foreclosure, and it broke my heart. So my gain was their loss. And so that highly motivated me, knowing that the only way that we can retain a mix of incomes is through affordable housing. I'm trying to go to the next slide, which is not letting me. There we go, finally. Okay. I'm going to mention briefly what we're not. So we believe in housing first. So our focus really, for the most part, is in permanent housing as opposed to shelters. We also focus on lower income as opposed to moderate. And we are not housing navigators or providers of housing. We don't do development. Our focus is that as advocates and more long-term housing that is affordable. So if you're looking for housing, we've developed a resource guide, and we hope that you will access this. It's all packed full of resources that might be of help to you, both in searching for housing, tenant issues, etc. Briefly, the umbrella that we're working under, I mentioned at the beginning, is Making Housing and Community Happen. It's a nonprofit. So GPAHG is just one part of this whole organization. We're also doing education and organizing on North Fair Oaks. So I'm going to share with you very briefly about what we're doing around advocacy, around education. So the one-day institutes, we've done 8 of these around the country and several in California, mostly in the Denver area. They've been highly effective. In every place we've gone, it's left a core of advocates continuing the efforts. And one's been in Monrovia, others Pasadena, Temple City. We also have one-year institutes. We have one going right now, and we have students from Colorado and Texas and California. So, so you might be interested in this course. Here's a link that tells you more about it. It really helps you to do community-based research and figure out how to do this kind of advocacy work in a deeper level in your own community. Here's some of the students and activities we've had around the course we have this year in our cohort. We went on tours of lots of different affordable housing models. We talked with the developers. It was very exciting for these students to experience.